everybody, it's your friendly neighborhood Jerry Rasco here with you again. It's time for another Amazing Spider-Man art retrospective video. Today is pretty interesting. We are seeing the return of another villain. So, we're starting to see this pattern with the series, if you've been following me since the beginning, with Amazing Spider-Man #1, actually going back to Amazing Fantasy 15 and then Amazing Spider-Man #1. We went through a process of a lot of introduction of new villains. Now that we are close to essentially a year in, so you figure each issue comes out once a month, and you had Amazing Fantasy 15 would be one, and then 11 issues after that. So we're kind of about a year into the run of Spider-Man here, and now we're starting to see the return of some of these villains that we were introduced to already. So we saw that with the Vulture returned, and now we have the return of another villain that arguably here in the early days of Spider-Man becomes his arch nemesis. Maybe not who you're thinking of if you're a fan of Spider-Man, but definitely somebody who plays a big role in the stories. So I'm looking forward to that, and looking forward to sharing this with you. So, of course, as always, I want to thank everybody who does support the videos and support my YouTube channel. So if you're catching this video and it's the first one that you've seen, there is a playlist here with all of my Spider-Man reviews. You can go back and start at the beginning or anywhere along the journey that you'd like and catch up. I also have a bunch of other videos that have to do with my individual art projects, things like my comic book M Squad, another comic book project that I'm working on called The Just. I have tutorial videos about art, drawing, tools, process, all that kind of stuff. So hopefully there's a little bit of something for everybody here on my channel. If you do enjoy this, please don't forget to subscribe. These videos do come out every Monday morning. And like the video. As well, leave comments. I do check those, and when I see folks leaving comments, I do like to either respond there in the comments, or sometimes I'll mention them here on the next video. So thank you for everybody who does, and without further ado, let's get into the comic. So here we go. We have Amazing Spider-Man #11, featuring the long-awaited return of Doctor Octopus. So we did see Doctor Octopus early on, and it was one of those early Spider-Man battles where he had to combine both his spider powers and Peter Parker's scientific genius to beat Doctor Octopus. And that kind of became a formula for quite some time when it came to Spider-Man and how he was going to defeat these villains that were theoretically more powerful than he was. And so here we go. Now we're going to talk about the return of Doctor Octopus. So first thing I noted is the good use of, and I said black. Now, I preface this in every video. This is a PDF scan that was made in the year 2004 of this original comic book. And this comic book goes back to, I believe, 1964. So obviously, we've got, a 40-year-old comic when the time it is scanned. So the colors may have shifted or faded. So you can tell it does look black down in some of the sides in the corner here. Up at the top, it almost kind of looks blue. So the question is it blue that over aged to black? Or was it a black background that faded to blue over time? Hard to say. But I do really like the use of that. It blacks out the areas where a lot of the copy is pasted. So where the Amazing Spider-Man is, your corner box, your numbering, your pricing, your comics code stuff, and this kind of big blurb about the return of Doctor Octopus, putting the color and the focus right here on Spider-Man and Doctor Octopus. And this is something that I think is really important that, for me, is sometimes lost in today's computer coloring. And what I mean by that is, with computer colors, we literally have every single shade of every color that has ever been available. And so what happens a lot of times, as opposed to back here where we had a limited palette, there's only so many shades of blue, so many shades of green, red, etc., because they're made with little dots of ink. And if you want to make the color darker, you put dots of black in between the dots of the color you want. Or if you want to make green, you're putting dots of yellow and dots of blue, and your eye mixes those into green. So what we've got here is Doctor Octopus in green, which does become part of his color palette. And we note that later in the book. And then you have Spider-Man, who is red and blue. And so you have this yellow background. Now, what does that do? So the yellow being a primary color, one of the three primary colors, so you have red and blue. You have sort of bluish pants for Doctor Octopus and this green top. Both figures pop out from this bright yellow behind them. And what happens with today is we're much more likely to just go, oh, well, they're inside of, we'll see in the story, they're inside the bottom of a ship. And it's probably going to be metal gray. We can see there's rivets and seams. And so somebody would color this a gray color. And then you have the gray tentacles of Dr. Octopus, the chrome or steel or whatever they're made out of, and the brown hair. And it dulls everything down. I see this way too often in modern coloring in comics where people will use a background color that is real, but is something that's also in the foreground and in the figures, and it flattens everything out, and it loses that pop, which is what makes comic books. That's one of the things that makes them so exciting, is the bright, vibrant colors and excitement. So I really like this old style. I would like to see more of that, and you could certainly do it with a modern flair. It doesn't have to be a bright canary yellow. You could use computer shading to add, shadows under all the rivets and in the porthole and all that kind of stuff. That's fine. But just let's remember our color theory, and let's make sure that the colors in the background aren't blending into the colors in the foreground, making it look like, everything is one big sort of dull blob. So that's just my little soapbox when it comes to old school coloring versus modern coloring. There's definitely, pluses and minuses for both, but in this case, if you're looking to pick up a comic book off the shelf and you have 20, 30, 40 things to choose from, the thing that's going to be bright, the thing that's going to catch your eye with bright reds and figures popping out, you're not going to notice at first that they're fighting on a boat. You're just going to notice that these two figures are in battle, and that might be enough to make you pick up the comic. So I really like that. So let's go in and look at the comic. And again, as I mentioned, I say this in every video, this is a scanned copy, so you will see things like the original advertisements that would have been in the comic as well. Just kind of a neat thing. We have this opening montage splash panel on page 1. We see that all the time. It's not bad. For me, there's not enough, again, copy. Like, there is a lot of information here. They're talking about Doctor Octopus, Betty Brant's secret, Spider-Man's victory. Is he going to lose Betty Brant because she doesn't like Spider-Man anymore, apparently? There's copy there, but you could make these figures much, much larger. But, I get it. You want the menacing shadow over the top of them, or, that's in the way. Okay. But you could still make these figures large. And then my opinion, as opposed to the whole figure of Dr. Octopus, I think you could just do the shadow of these arms. We know what that is. If you've read this far, that you'd recognize the 4 arms, the mechanical arms of Dr. Octopus and the claws on the end. I think that's personally how I would do it. It's a perfectly fine splash page, but it lacks a little pizzazz. Again, just my opinion. So we've got Spidey, and what a good comic book does is it assumes that this comic book is somebody's first comic book, that you may have been waiting, and after a year decided, maybe this Spider-Man's a real thing, or somebody else who read Spider-Man was like, oh, you got to pick this up. This is great. So you need to do a little recap. So, in the first page of story here, he talks about what's happening with Betty Brant, who is his sort of girlfriend, if you will, certainly somebody he's interested in, and that she's left town. He hears on the radio that Doctor Octopus is going to be released from prison, and he thinks back, and we have this nice recap image from their original fight, where he ends up defeating, right before he defeats Doctor Octopus the first time. And so he's like, you know what, I gotta go and talk to the warden and make sure that Doctor Octopus can't be let free because he's too dangerous. So Spidey heads over there, and I noted in this panel, this is a great swing. Steve Ditko so far has been the artist on every issue, and he's done a terrific job of creating unique ways of showing Spider-Man swinging at stuff. But every once in a while, this is a very traditional swing. This looks like somebody from swinging on a rope, a trapeze, a rope over water, whatever it is. This looks like a real person. The legs out, the way the arms are bent back, and the shoulders up around the face. This is a really, really nice swinging pose. I've talked a lot in my series about foreshortening, which is when you have a three-dimensional object that comes towards you in a two-dimensional plane like a piece of paper. And the way you draw that is you overlap those forms and you make them shorter than they would appear to be. That's why it's called foreshortening. And he does a nice job with this leg where it's coming out towards the reader and then the rest of the body going back away. So terrific swing pose. Even though it's very traditional, it works fantastic. I've mentioned a few times about colors and color theories, and we've seen this with other characters. I mentioned it, I think, just in the last video or two. A lot of your criminals, a lot of your villains are shown in what we call secondary colors. So for anybody who's not familiar with a color wheel or basic color theory, you have three primary colors. These colors can't be made by mixing two other colors. So red, blue, and yellow are your primary colors. Your secondary colors are the colors that are made by mixing two of those together. So red and yellow make orange, red and blue make purple, and yellow and blue make green. So your heroes are almost always in your primary colors, red and blue for Spider-Man. So how do you depict Doctor Octopus? You put him in green. And again, it's a psychology issue that lets you know, even though he's being released from prison and they say that he's been rehabilitated, we know that he really hasn't. He's still showing his villainous tendencies. And a way you do that from a visual standpoint, as opposed to just flat out saying it, is one of the ways you could do it is put them in secondary colors. So again, for comic books, because you're mixing the visual and the literary components of a story, as an artist, I've always been told that it's better to show and not tell. Now, there's obviously a little bit of both mixed together when it comes to comics, but this is a way you can show that a villain is a villain without actually just saying, him twirling a mustache or whatever, in this case, lighting a cigarette, I'm going to do horrible things. So this is a way to show us he probably hasn't changed a lot. And then here we have at the bottom in this panel, and I believe it comes to the next page here, we have Spidey Science. And so this is my beliefs, again, so far, tracking through these issues, this is the first appearance of Spider-Man's spider tracers. So we know that Spidey has what he refers to as his Spidey sense. It is like a sixth sense that warns him of danger. So he gets kind of a buzzing in the back of his head when something dangerous is nearby. And it allows him, with his superhuman reflexes, to react in time and avoid, what's going on. That's how he can dodge bullets. That's how he dodges punches, all that kind of stuff. So as a scientist, he's figured out that he can make this little device that has some sort of radio chip transmitter inside of it, and his spider sense will react to it. So when he gets close, the closer he gets, the stronger he senses it. So this is a way for him to mark somebody or something and be able to find it later. And it becomes a really big, just a part of Spidey's repertoire, just like his web shooters or his spider signal light that he has on his belt. And this is the first time that we see it. Now, in this, when it starts with here, he has a receiver. So as opposed to using his spider sense to detect it, he has a little radio signal or little radio receiver that would beep when he gets closer. Eventually, he makes that transition to where he can just use his spider sense. But again, just the idea of Peter is a genius. He may not be Iron Man genius, he may not be Mr. Fantastic genius, but he's up there to be able to come up with some of the stuff that he does. So here we go. We have our first spider tracers, and in classic comic book fashion, he makes it look like a little spider. Right? Could look like anything. Could be a little disc. Could be a square. Could be any shape, but he makes it look like a little spider. And then we have Doctor Octopus has been let out of prison. And again, now he's changed out of the clothes. The green that he was in before is prison fatigues, but now he's in a purple suit with a green hat. So still, he's still in those secondary colors. He could have been in a blue suit, a black suit, a gray suit, whatever, but deliberately color choice of somebody wearing a purple suit. It's not something you see a lot of. And but again, it's a psychology to tell us that even though he has been released from jail, even if you don't read the dialogue that's going on or the narration that's going on, he is still a villain. And who's picking him up from prison as he's released? Betty Brant. And she is wearing green. Again, not so much as she's a villain, but she's doing something villainous. She's not a heroic figure in this case. Again, just another psychology of color. So it's kind of a neat idea. So we're going to skip ahead here. I talk a lot in this video series, if you've watched any of these, about the panels and the panel, what we call our page composition. So that is, how do you arrange all of the imagery on the page to help tell the story and move the reader's eye through the page. And in a lot of these pages, and let me go back real quick and see if we have a real good example. So like this page right here is just 6 panels. Every one is exactly the same size. No one is a larger focus or attention than any of the others. So, and the whole thing is kind of taking place for me now. So these first 5 are all taking place kind of at the same time in the same location, which is the prison. It's the warden's office, and then it's Doc Ock's cell. Then we cut back to Peter, and he's at home. There's something where you could have used a different panel size to indicate a change in scenery. We don't. And so that could be a little confusing for some people. Now it does say, again, you clarify in the narration that he's back home again. But you can't rely on somebody catching all the details, or, again, a lot of these comics were made for children, and are they reading them as much as they're looking at the pictures and interpreting the story? Maybe, but again, that's something you could do, is change that panel size to indicate a change of scene. So these are okay, and they work as far as pacing and telling the story. But one of the things that you want to do just to make a more interesting reading experience is to change up your panel sizes. And so one of the ways that we do that here, and this is one where they've changed the scenery. So the blonde man, it turns out to be Betty's brother, and he is a lawyer, and he's representing a criminal, and the guy has dirt on him. I think he owes him money, or the guy's he's into gambling, something like that. And so basically this is all going to get to, you can tell who the bad guy is. His eyes are so dark. Again, he's in green. It's all about getting him out of jail. And so this guy has to do this. So now we change scenes where he comes home, and Doctor Octopus is sort of threatening his sister. And so we've used a horizontal panel for 2 reasons. One is to change the scenery. So we're no longer at the prison. He's no longer visiting this guy here. He's back home, so it's a change of scene, and it really emphasizes the horizontal nature of these arms. So if you had done, one of like this panel in half, and you only had half the space to do it, it doesn't really give you that sense that Betty is backed up against a wall and he's stretched out those arms to get her. It would be so small. All the details would be super tiny. This is a great way to just emphasize the nature of the arms, the change of scenery, and the threat to Betty over here in the corner, pushed all the way up, basically to the edge of the panel. So that's a really nice use of the horizontal panel, and something that, again, as a storyteller, you can certainly keep in mind as you're making your own comics and your own stories. So Peter is going to travel to try to find Betty, and he knows that they're in because they found a map. He found a map earlier, and it's Philadelphia. So he's going to go to Philadelphia to look for Betty. And so I like with these two panels here. Let me give you a quick example. When Peter is swinging around in New York City, it looks like this. And we can see stuff that we think of as New York City. Now he lives in Queens, which is a little more suburb area as opposed to downtown Manhattan. But we've seen plenty of examples in the comics so far of him and skyscrapers, high-rise buildings, all that stuff as he goes through, New York City. Well, now with just a couple of panels, the background's really different. We don't see this kind of architecture when he's swinging around in New York. This looks older, almost castle-y like. You've got this tower with the rounded top. There's some more smokestacks that we haven't really seen in New York, right? Because there's no factories in Midtown Manhattan that I'm aware of. So a couple small details of changing your background. He's swinging through a city. Philadelphia is a city just like any other city. Could have drawn just regular, blocky buildings, but made an effort to sort of, with some very simple things, identify that the background is different and that Spidey is swinging around in a different place. So I really appreciate that, and I do like that quite a bit. Let's see. Oh, so we've seen this before where, when where Peter is talking about Spidey, whether it's his spider senses going off or just the idea that they're talking about Spider-Man, half his face kind of is drawn as his mask. And this one is really weird. And I don't know if it's because the eye is colored in red instead of black. Like, was that done on purpose? Is it a coloring error? Should the whole thing have been much lighter? Because he's not really wearing half a costume. It's just, it's just it's not a metaphor. It's just a visual cue to everybody. Like, don't forget, this guy has two personalities that he's dealing with. So even if he's kind of not bad mouthing, but he's talking about Spider-Man, he is Spider-Man. So it's just weird, and it's a way we haven't seen it drawn before. So it's something that I noted, like, that's a little different. Okay, so now Doctor Octopus goes to the prison and breaks out the guy that we've seen before. So Spidey is swinging around again. Not bad. Certainly okay panels. Nothing fabulous or really critical here as far as talking about from an artistic standpoint. Just kind of moving along. Let's see. Another decent swinging pose. Again, pretty standard. A little more realistic than some of the crazy poses that we've seen before, but that's okay. Basic panel layout. Nothing particularly fancy there. So Spidey knows they're there. He's followed them, and he's going to try to rescue everybody. He lands and hits a pile of rope that he didn't see and sprains his ankle. And I wrote my notes, sprained ankle, ? I say this because this is a superhero who can lift cars over his head, who can bend and flex in ways that a normal human being can't, in terms of, you know, being upside down, you know, wrapping around, swinging through the air, doing stuff that again, a normal human body couldn't do, and somehow manages to sprain his ankle. You would think either his ankles would be flexible enough to not worry about it, or strong enough that it wouldn't happen. So why is this a big deal? Why do we take 2 panels to show that he has sprained his ankle? And that is because, again, something that we talked about in the last issue. We talked about in a couple episodes. How do you hobble Spider-Man to make regular, villains, regular criminals, regular human beings a threat to him? I just talked about all the stuff he can do. He can lift a car. He has a spider sense, so he knows if somebody's going to get the drop on him. He's incredibly flexible. He can stick to walls, ceilings, any surface. There's a lot going for him. So when he's fighting regular guys, there's no risk. There's no threat. We're not worried about Spider-Man fighting 5 or 6, thugs. Well, if you hobble him, you sprain his ankle, you make it so that he is working at a disadvantage. Now the hero has to overcome that disadvantage. And that is something that's important when you're talking about the hero journey, right? They have to overcome obstacles and difficulties. So that's how they're doing it in this particular case. We've got Spidey spraining an ankle, and now he still has to deal with all these guys, plus Doctor Octopus. Talk about this upshot of Doctor Octopus. Crazy face. You can sort of feel like the face almost with the lines in it and the way that the flesh is drawn and kind of bends and moves around. It almost feels putty-like. But it's a great angle for a villain, right? You look up. The villain is towering over you. Again, it's all about the psychology of storytelling. If you look down on somebody, you have a position of power, right? The high ground, the height, whatever you want to think of it. If you're looking up at someone, that's more intimidating. He has the upper hand. He is bigger. He is looming. That's all stuff that, again, falls into the psychology. So when you want to make somebody look more dangerous, more threatening, what we call an upshot. So imagine every one of these images is a picture taken by a camera, and you're either horizontal, you're turning it down, or you're turning it up. So in this case, this is an up shot, and we're looking at Doc Ock. So very nice there. Not an easy angle to draw the human face. It shortens up everything. Your nose becomes closer to the eyes, and the ears get a different position on the head. And if you don't do it right, it's very weird. Probably helps if you have a character that is kind of weird looking to start with. Let's see. I mentioned in my note says consistency with the ankle. So we noted that Spidey has sprained his right ankle. So you can see his weight is on his left foot over there, and it's lifted off his right foot. He shoots webbing to the ceiling and lifts himself up, and he's kicking guys with his left foot, dangling that right foot down. As he is swinging, same thing, kind of keeping that injured right foot out of the way. He swings and punches a couple guys, and now he's going to drop down and land, try to stop this guy from grabbing a gun. His right foot is bent up, and his left foot is extended. So same thing here. He is landed on his left foot, and that right foot is held up and out of the way. So it's a nice note. It would be very easy to just say, oh, I sprained my ankle, and then just move on and not really think about it. But Steve Ditko has done a wonderful job of storytelling here with the body language to keep the consistency that Spider-Man's right ankle is injured. And so all of his weight, all of his actions have to be on his left foot. Here, Betty's brother is shot by a ricochet or a random shot. as the two are fighting, and he dies. And of course, she doesn't blame the crook, and she doesn't blame her brother for getting into this position in the first place. She blames Spider-Man, because if you just left him alone, everything would have been fine. The bad guys would have never shot him. Okay. It's a little bit thin storytelling, but it feeds into the continuing drama of Peter and his personal life as well. So now the girl that he is falling for and wants to be involved with, she now loves Peter and hates Spider-Man, and will hate Spider-Man forever. So now we have to deal with that. Let's see here. I like this. So Spidey is mad, and even with the one ankle, and again being consistent, this leg is where the weight is on the left leg. The right leg is held up. Same here. The weight is on the left leg. Now the toe is touching, but that's okay. That's actually how you would probably limp around if you had a sprained ankle. He punches and throws these guys off him. Again, all of his weight is on that left foot. So Spidey's mad, and you can see when he's mad, it doesn't matter. These guys are just hanging off him, punching him as hard as they can, and it's like they're not even there. And he just throws these human beings like they're a baseball. So just a quick example of how powerful Spider-Man is, which plays right into this, which is where my notes were. Is I like this image of Doc Ock just clearing people out. So, he wants to get to Spider-Man, and he's like, get out of my way. And doing it with the arms coming at us, the reader, feeling like this guy, if as we're looking at it, if we were really looking at it in person, this guy would clear us out too. And so the body language of the guys getting thrown around, the perspective, that foreshortening again of the arms, the tentacle arms coming at you, is really cool. So what you have is these two guys kind of doing the same thing. Spidey with his power just shrugging these guys off, and then Doc Ock also so powerful he's just shrugging off mere mortals as well. So this is setting up for a big battle between these two powerful characters. So we have some more fighting, and again, jumping around, Spidey staying out of the way. This is always the threat of Doctor Octopus, is that he has the reach. He has the 4 tentacle arms plus his physical arms and fists to punch. So it's a little tough to get in close for Spider-Man to, put the hurt on Doctor Octopus because of that reach in those arms. So he's trying to figure something to do. He's running and trying to keep up a plan at the same time. So he's moving around pretty good. And then we have here, again, another great use of the horizontal. Terrific way of explaining just what showing what I just explained. Doc Ock has the reach. So even if he's not close to Spidey, these tentacles can stretch and reach and put Spidey in a perilous position. Let's put it that way. So I really like the horizontal panel here. It breaks up all this pacing of panel, all the same size, all the same pacing, which is great. The action is fast. We want to keep that going, but this is a really nice break there from a reading perspective on the turn, what we call that. So as you turn the page that you couldn't see until you turned it is a great opportunity for things like this, whether it's a change in a scene, a change in the composition. This is where you would put a splash page, a story surprise, something like that on the page turn. So very, very nice there. Spidey is trying to hobble him using some gear, some of this boating gear, the pulley and rope, to try to wrap up Doc Ock's arms temporarily. Very nice twisting poses, especially this one here. So the inside arm has been grabbed, and he's going to twist into it, right? He couldn't twist away because the arm is, we've established the arm is super strong, maybe as strong as Spider-Man, maybe even stronger. So he can't twist his arm away, so he twists into it, and bringing that body around. So that's a really nice twisting pose. He ducks away, and then again, hobbling. So consistency on that ankle. He's running away. Don't say anything about the ankle. He doesn't have to say, oh, my injured ankle is really bothering me, because Steve is showing us that the injured ankle is bothering him by him grabbing at it, the little shake lines that he's kind of hobbling, he's hopping on it. In fact, we can see down here at the bottom of the panel, these little lines indicate he's sort of hopping, hop, hop, hop on that left leg. Great figure work there. Again, showing, not telling. Great visual storytelling methodology. Oh, and I like this here. So they're again just moving through. Spidey is looking for a way to get the drop on him, on Doctor Octopus. So he's just buying time by running until he can turn on him somehow. So he ends up getting a fire extinguisher and creates this cloud that will obscure Doc Ock's vision, but of course Spidey doesn't have any problems with that. And this great image of him diving between all the arms. So diving through and landing just on those fingertips. I really like that. That was one of the things from the previous scene, or previous issue, where Peter's kind of crouched down and all his weight is just on those fingertips. Something that would be hard to do if you weren't a superhero, right? It was extremely strong. Normally you'd want to land on that palm, but just the fingertips is all the weight right there, from the whole body as he's leaping through. And then the way the arms are framing, bending around him because they're just searching and he's finding that angle through. That's a great panel. That's something that, again, in modern comics today, you would make as one of the larger panels on the page. So you might do more of a close-up here, slightly smaller maybe, of him webbing up the door. We might be able to, there'd be something you do with these two. You need both of these. Well, maybe you don't really need this panel. Maybe it's just a close-up of Spidey grabbing the fire extinguisher off the wall and then spraying. You'd want this to be what's called an anchor panel. It's the biggest, most important action of the whole page, which is Spidey leaping through these arms and this cloud of smoke and breaking away from Doc Ock so he can try to go find Betty and make sure she's okay. So that's a change from 1960s storytelling to 2024 storytelling. Let's see here. So again, more stuff. This is just the same action. It's okay. Nothing, again, quick pacing as far as the panels go. Nothing crazy from an art standpoint that I would point out to go, ooh, that's really exciting. Pretty basic storytelling stuff. We're okay. This is really nice. We have a nice vertical panel because Spidey is leaping down. So they've gone from a larger boat to the smaller boat. He swings off and falls down to confront Doc Ock. So he's using that, basically the vertical aspect to drop down inside of the reach of those arms, to get inside that reach so he can really try to get past his defense and attack the body itself. I really like that. I'd like to see more of those. I mean, it makes sense as Spidey is somebody that can travel easily, as easily horizontal as he can vertical. So great vertical panel here. I like that a lot. And then the fight continues until the boat crashes. And of course, Doctor Octopus isn't found. Betty is safe. The guy that was broken out of prison that ended up shooting his brother, he's caught by the police. So all the bad guys are going back to jail. Spidey gets away, but they can't find Doctor Octopus. and he realizes his ankle's bad enough. Don't take any chances. So he makes himself a little web splint or ace bandage, if you will, webs it up nice and tight so he can walk around without a limp and give away the fact that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. So now we get back to just the closing, Peter and Betty talking about, what happened and her brother, and she does come around and she's like, it wasn't Spider-Man's fault. I wish I could apologize to him. And she's like, okay. And Peter's like, I get you. I'm sure he would understand. But of course, there's always going to be that between them. And Peter realizes it, and he walks off into the night, and we see Peter Small and his alter ego, this sort of spirit of his alter ego above him in a similar fashion, head down. He's won the day, but what's the cost of winning the day? And this is a Spidey / Peter walking off into the night trope that we see in the ending of a lot of these Spider-Man comics. So very common thing, something we see a lot of, and becomes a thread for Peter. I do want to just, even though we're at the end of the story here and stuff, I do want to point out something that I noticed in this overall that is a little bit different than some of the previous issues. And I think, again, this is, as I mentioned, this is about a year into the run. So we have, Steve Ditko has drawn essentially 12 issues of Spider-Man now. And I think he's developing, and you can see an evolution that's coming in the way that he's doing it. And I want to point out some examples of that. So for so we go to here, this is a more traditional Spider-Man image. And what I mean by that is you look at the webbing design. Let me zoom in on the cover here. The webbing design on his mask is fairly small, right? So it starts at the nose, between the eyes, and bridges out. And so he's got, the one little circle in the middle, 2, 3, 4, 5 rings around his head. You'd see how small the webbing design is before it even reaches the spider on his chest. So, and he's muscular, but he's not as big as Doctor Octopus. Doctor Octopus has a larger physique than Spidey. He's thin. He's still a teenager. That's the idea, right? Even though he's super strong, he's not bulky like a weightlifter. His muscles are stronger than they need to be large. Let's put it that way, right? But then we come in here on this splash page, and this is one of the first times you notice it. Now, part of it might be just the size that this is drawn at. So being that it's drawn at a smaller size on the page, the webbing design is larger. There's fewer through lines. There's fewer of the horizontal scalloped lines. And so we're starting to see that web pattern become bigger. Again, there's a few reasons you might see that. A smaller figure, it's a lot harder to get itty bitty tiny little lines in there, especially in the old days if you were applying the inks. So you would draw this in pencil and then go over it with ink, and you might be doing that with a brush. And so it'd be a very tiny, fine, pointed brush. But if you wanted to make these lines smaller than that on a figure that's maybe 3 or 4 inches big, maybe even 5 inches tall, that's very, very fine line work, and is a little hard to do. So that might be why. It might also be an evolution in the style. It's faster to draw fewer of the web lines on Spidey. The more little web scallops pattern that you put on, the more time it takes. And comic books are a monthly grind. You've got to do 20 something pages in less than 30 days to get it out to print so that you've got, a comic book ready for the next month. That's pressure. Those are deadlines. So less line work means faster art. So let's go through and look. So again, you have some where it's just it's pretty normal. It doesn't really seem, there's nothing that threw me off that went, oh, that's really different, until later in the issue. And I'll show you specifically some examples that I'm thinking of here, especially in this end fight. So when we get to like, where did I really notice it? So like in here, this is a really large web pattern on Spidey. Even this close up, right? So even if you're saying that it's the overall size of the figure doesn't allow for fine detail work, here's a close up, and the web design on Spidey is still pretty large. So that's something to kind of note, and it's something that does become part of the what we call the model. So when other artists down the road take over this comic and begin to draw Spidey, they create what's called a model or a model sheet, or you want to be on model, which means we want to be consistent. Everybody wants to draw Spidey the same. So to do that, you can't have the pattern on his costume vary from artist to artist. You need to be consistent with it. And this is something that we'll see down the road, is that the webbing pattern gets larger. And then here's the other thing. Spidey in some of these panels is drawn much bulkier than we've ever seen him before. Like, look at this panel right here. This is not like a 16-year-old kid body. Even though he is a superhero, he's always been lean, he's always been thin, but now you're really starting to see some bulk in this. Now, is that because Spidey's growing up and getting older and putting on muscle? Is that the actual real story? Is it just an error in the way he's drawn? Again, as you start to see, as we move into future artists who draw Spidey, there are some very classic and well-known artists that are going to take over the book, that are going to draw him as more of a not huge. He's not big like the Hulk. He may not be even as muscular as, say, like a Captain America, but he's definitely in costume. He's no pushover. Nobody's looking at Spidey and going, look at that scrawny kid. He is getting to be a bulky dude. And you can see it here. Like, again, Doc Ock in the first couple appearances here has been drawn as bigger, thicker. There's jokes about him being chubby, in the future. These two guys aren't that far apart in terms of just the size of their bodies. The size of Spidey's legs, the thickness of his shoulder, like they're pretty even, pretty on par. And again, we see that here as well. This is an opportunity. He's just sitting there, but Spidey's fairly bulky, fairly thick. And so what we'll have to do is, we can look back at old issues and see if that's still the case, or compare. Is it just because this one's a little different? Or as well, when we look at future issues, until we change artists, is Steve Ditko still drawing him in that way? Is this just an evolution of style, or is this an evolution of character? And that's one of the fun things for me when you get to go back and look at a history. Imagine if you only saw these comics once a month, you might not notice that difference. It might be very subtle over time. But when we can look back at these every 7 days on these video series, we're going to pick up those evolutions, those changes over a much shorter period of time. And we'll really be able to see that change. So I'm very excited to see where that goes and what's going to happen next. So there we have The Amazing Spider-Man number 11. As always, written by Stan Lee and drawn by the incredible Steve Ditko. And the return and then defeat and disappearance of Doctor Octopus, which certainly tells us he will be back. But what's going to happen next for our superhero? Only time will tell. So next week, we will find out. If you join me here for another episode of the Amazing Spider-Man art retrospective videos. Thank you so much for all your support. I look forward to talking to you next week, and we'll see you then.